Hi, in this video, we'll look at how to run accessibility tests with Chromatic. Chromatic builds on Storybook and Axe to integrate accessibility testing into your workflow. You write stories to create tests for your components and run accessibility checks locally within Storybook. So for example, here I have stories for everything from tiny little components like the badge component to something more complex like the restaurant card component, all the way up to stories for entire pages. So as I navigate between those stories, Storybook runs Axe on each one of those stories and displays the results in the add-on panel like you see here. Then when you're ready to merge, Chromatic takes over. It uses its cloud browsers to run Axe across your entire Storybook. It also tracks violations from commit to give you a regression-based workflow. Let's see this in action. To get started, you need to be on Storybook 6.5 or above and have the accessibility add-on installed and enabled. Head over to the Manage page for your project and enable accessibility tests. Scroll down to the test section. Within that, you'll see an option for accessibility tests. Hit the enable button. Now I'm going to switch over to the terminal to run a Chromatic build. I'm using the Chromatic CLI here. You can use the CLI or an existing CI setup that you might have. Since this is the first build that's running after we've enabled accessibility tests, Chromatic is going to use this to establish baselines for all of your stories. So what exactly is an accessibility baseline? In visual testing, Chromatic captures a visual snapshot of the story as it's rendered in the browser. The baseline is the last approved snapshot of that particular story. Subsequent snapshots are then compared to this baseline to identify any visual changes. In accessibility testing, instead of capturing a snapshot of the UI, Chromatic tracks all the accessibility violations detected for a specific story. Things like low color contrast or a missing alt attribute. That's what gets tracked in the baseline. If subsequent snapshots have new violations, you're then asked to approve those new violations and add them to the baseline or resolve the accessibility issues that were caught. Now that the build is complete, let's take a look at it. Since this is the first build after we enabled accessibility testing, Chromatic has captured accessibility snapshots for all our stories and auto-accepted them as baselines. For example, if you look at this homepage component, this component has one accessibility issue related to this button here. If I scroll down to the accessibility panel, I can get a little bit more information about it. Now, this particular violation has been added to the baseline. So what that means is in the future, as Chromatic runs accessibility tests on this component, unless it finds new issues, it's not going to complain about this particular issue. But if you resolve this issue, then it will remove it from the baseline. Now that we have the baselines established, let's see the regression checks in action. Let's say I was tasked with changing the colors for our badge component. So this component here. I'm going to switch over to the code and change the colors to the new colors that were provided to me. You can see the UI has updated in Storybook here. Now let's make a commit and run Chromatic again. The build is complete, so let's take a look. So we have a bunch of changes here. That's to be expected because we changed the color, so you're going to see some UI changes. Let's start with the badge component. So yeah, most certainly we can see that the colors change. So Chromatic is flagging that there is a visual diff. But if I go ahead and turn on accessibility toggle from up here, it is also flagging an accessibility issue. So the colors we chose don't quite have enough contrast, so it's flagging the color contrast issue. In this diff panel, you can see Chromatic will highlight elements that have an accessibility violation associated with it in red. Clicking on it will show you some information. You can even launch the published storybook from here to go and inspect the UI in the browser. Or you can scroll down to the accessibility panel and get more detailed information on that particular violation. So what type of violation it is. There's even a link to some information around how you can fix it. a specific DOM node where the violation was executed and a focused image of that particular DOM node, along with more details of exactly what's happening, what's the background color, what's the foreground color in this particular example. So as I go through the stories, you'll notice that some stories don't have any accessibility violations. So our UI supports both light mode and dark mode. In dark mode, the colors that we chose do seem to have high enough contrast, but in light mode, it is certainly flagging that as a low contrast issue. So as we continue, you'll notice we'll go back to that homepage component that we looked at. And again, there are issues with that badge component on the homepage component. If I scroll down to the accessibility panel, because this is being that badge is used multiple times on the homepage, you can see it being flagged here. And remember, in the baseline, there was also an issue with the button. That is because that is previously accepted, that has not been flagged again for us, but you can always click on that previously accepted button to see what other accessibility violations are associated with this particular story. You can now pick different colors to resolve the accessibility issues, or if you need to address them later, accept these violations to add them to the baseline. Now, some commits may only have accessibility violations, but no associated visual changes. For example, in this commit, we accidentally removed the alt text for this particular image. In such cases, you won't see the previous and next snapshot. You'll only see the latest snapshot with the problematic DOM node highlighted. So in this case, the entire image is highlighted in red. That's because visually, nothing has changed in this story, but there is a diff in the accessibility baseline for this particular story. That covers the basics of accessibility testing in Chromatic, from establishing baselines to catching new violations and tracking changes over time. For more details on setup and configuration, check out the accessibility testing documentation.